Welcome to an episode of InRange. I'm coming to you today with one of my favorite things. And if you know this channel at all, you know one of my favorite things are lever action rifles. That's right. And today we're going to talk about the 1892 Winchester, and this one specifically from Heritage Manufacturing from Brazil. But first I want to talk to you about the history of the 1892 and how it came to be, and then we'll do a review of this gun that you can buy today. So going way back, there was the volcanic pistol, and that had a toggle link style action, which was what inspired the 1860 Henry, which really turned into a lever action rifle, the first truly viable, fast, repeating lever action rifle. Used the same toggle link locking action, loaded from the front, and was chambered in 44 Henry, which was more than sufficient for the time, but still a pistol cartridge. Then they improved it into the 1866 Winchester, added a wooden handguard, added the Kingsgate, retained that 44 Henry rimfire cartridge. But as all things, people wanted a little more power, and to get more power, they eventually strengthened the receiver from gunmetal or brass or bronze and turned it into a steel frame receiver and chambered it in a new, at that time, proprietary cartridge, the 44 Winchester centerfire, which we refer to now as the 4440. Now, the 1873 Winchester really changed the game even further. Obviously, a very beautiful gun, but a number of improvements were included. Besides chambering it in 4440 or 44 Winchester centerfire, which was significantly more powerful than the 44 Henry, you added a dust cover. You added a out-of-battery safety system, which is a plunger right here that when the lever is closed, until the lever is entirely closed, it will not fire. So you have to depress it and then fire the gun. It sounds like not a lot, but chambering that new cartridge of 44 Winchester centerfire, a steel frame, a dust cover, out-of-battery safety, this made this a perfect gun in my opinion. I don't think any lever gun has actually excelled better or surpassed the qualities of the 1873 Winchester, and it is until this day still that my preference when it comes to a lever action rifle is the 1873 Winchester. But as we see today, just like back then, people are always wanting more power. And I would argue that when it comes to these lever actions, you don't necessarily need more power. They're more like the assault rifle of their day in terms of having high capacity, high rate of fire with low recoil with a relatively intermediate cartridge. And I think you could argue that in Old West terms, 4440, especially in its plus P loadings that they did for the rifles, was sort of an intermediate cartridge. However, like I said, everyone wanted more power, all the time more power, and so Winchester added this to their catalog, the 1876 Winchester. Still the same toggle link action, because that was what they were good at, but they wanted to provide something that was considered more of a rifle type chambering. Now, the only way you make a toggle link action stronger is just making it bigger. The bigger you make it, the larger and more powerful cartridge it can handle. But in the process of trying to do this, what they were trying to do was actually chamber, or wanted to do, was compete with the 1881 Marlin, which has a totally different action internally, that was chambering the then very, and still very popular, 4570 government cartridge. But Winchester knew toggle links, and they didn't have a patent on Marlin's action, and so what they did is they just upscaled a 73, made it bigger, you can see that right here on camera, and by making it bigger, made it more capable of handling a more powerful cartridge, but they couldn't quite get to 4570. So these are chambered in a number of cartridges that are just shy of 4570. This one happens to be in 4560. That means that it was not as popular as something that would be chambered in 4570. So they had a problem. Marlin was beating them at their own lever action game. And so who did they go to? Well, John Moses Browning, of course. He was, at that moment, developing a single-shot rifle for them, and he told them that he could put together a lever action very rapidly, and they said, go for it. And that he did. And what he came with was the 1886 Winchester, which is smaller. If it looks a lot like an 1876, but it's a little smaller and a little lighter than the 1876, but due to his new, entirely redesigned action, it was able to handle the 4570 government cartridge. And now Winchester was once again on equal footing with Marlin. They now had a lever gun that was strong enough to handle 4570. In fact, Browning's design was so strong it could handle things far greater than 4570. In fact, it moved easily into the smokeless realm in terms of its strength. And so now Winchester was competing equally with Marlin. So now we're up to this point, and Marlin goes, well, we have to compete because we have competition with Winchester in the 45-70 rifle market, but now Marlin's going to do the opposite. They don't really have anything to compete with Winchester in the pistol caliber market, i.e. the 1873 Winchester is dominating the market on that end, and Marlin's really not in that game. So they developed the 1889 Marlin, which is kind of a smaller version of their 1881. So they took their 45-70, made it smaller, and made, this is not it, but they made a 1889 Marlin, chambered in pistol calibers, to compete with the 1873 Winchester. So we've got a tit for tat here. Winchester's winning on the pistol cartridge. Marlin's winning on the rifle cartridge. Winchester tries to compete in the rifle cartridge, doesn't quite cut it. Then they come out with the 1886 Winchester from Browning, which absolutely is a fantastic rifle. And they're now beating Marlin at the rifle game. And then Marlin decides, well, we got to beat you or at least compete with you in the pistol cartridge game. So they come out with the 1889 to compete against the 1873. Well, at that point, numbers and such are a funny thing. When you have the 1873 competing with an 1889, for some people, the bigger number, 1889, sounds like it's more modern and better, right? Well, Winchester wants to modernize their pistol cartridge lever action options on the market. They go back to Browning and ask him what he can do. He says he can pop that out real easy, and that's what he did. He took his, same thing in reverse, he took his 1886 Winchester, shrunk it down, and made the 1892 Winchester. This is identical in form and function of the action of the 1886, just shrunk down for smaller cartridges. So when they put this on the market, of course, in the venerable 44 Winchester centerfire, same thing that the majority of 1873 Winchesters are chambered in. This was now Winchester's modern offering, more modern, in terms of competing with the 1889 Marlin. That said, the 1873 was so popular, this one right here, that even after the 1892 came out, they continued making the 1873 for decades, regardless of the fact that they now had a quote-unquote more modern 1892. But the reality is, while they are both lever actions, they really couldn't be any more different internally. To the person using them, you may not really notice, because there's a Kingsgate, cycle the action, chambers around and fire, but the internal mechanism is entirely different. So let's turn the camera around and let's take a look at what the 1892 is and how it functions. So let's compare them more directly right off the bat. This is the 1873 and this is the 1892. This is the toggle link system, which has a knee joint, which keeps it in battery and safe to fire. And this has locking lugs that actually extend up and into the bolt, locking the system, making this is a very, very strong action. But what you'll see in what I mentioned earlier, the only way to make the 1873 toggle link strong enough to handle cartridges, depending on whatever pressure you're trying to deal with, is to make it pretty big and hefty. In that regard, the 73, even in the same cartridge, is still a bigger, heavier gun. Now, the 73 though, the toggle link action, has the advantage of being extremely smooth. This is a very smooth action. The 92, due to the fact that it's got those locking lugs, you can see it's a little more clunky. Now, to anything but the most discerning shooter, honestly, in practice, it's not going to matter. However, that difference is one of the things that keeps me as an 1873 guy. That said, I think the 92 is the right choice for a lot of people. So let's go ahead and focus on that gun. As with all the Winchesters with a Kingsgate, you load through right here. And your tube length, which is also similar or equal to your barrel length, determines your capacity. So if you want more rounds in the gun, get a longer gun. It's really as simple as that. Get a carbine, you hold less rounds. Get something in between, you hold more rounds. Get a 24-inch barrel and you hold the most rounds possible. You could even get a 30-inch barrel in some instances and have even more rounds on deck. But for someone that was used to the 1873, this will feel no different to them, except it is substantially lighter and more svelte. In fact, just comparing them two next to each other, you can see it's a thinner gun, smaller, lighter, easier to handle. And if you're carrying a gun more than shooting a gun, that is an advantage, and that is something the 1892 brings to the table in a very good way. So, the original 1892 only had one safety, and that was a safety notch on the hammer. And this Heritage still retains that safety notch. Now, all modern 19.2 manufacturers that I've seen, at least all the Brazilian ones, have this external safety here on top. What that does is it blocks the firing pin. I'm sure some lawyer came up with this a long, long time ago, and they've done this ever since. Just slip that to fire, and you see a little red dot, and that's good to go. It's a little ugly, but it's unobtrusive. It's not in the way. It's better than some crossbolt thing or something like that. But if you want to use the gun historically, that's what that safety cock is for. Now, this is not a toggle link action. As you move the lever, it actually drops the locking lugs. You can see that right there. And as those go down, it then starts to retract the bolt, which cocks the hammer, which makes it ready to fire in the next cycle, which is exactly like the original 73. A round pops out onto the lifter, which is right there. And as you close it, it then brings the round up, pops it out, and then chambers it into the chamber. At the final stroke of closing the lever, the locking lugs close, and it is now safe to fire. So another thing the 92 brings to the table that's not immediately obvious is it is technically a safer gun. Browning designed this very intelligently, and when you retract the lever, it actually also retracts the firing pin in the bolt. And that means that until it is completely closed and the lever is entirely forward, it is not possible for the firing pin to come in contact with the primer. Even if something's broken or there's dirt and debris jamming the firing pin, this mechanically pulls the firing pin away from the face of the bolt. The 1873 has an out-of-battery plunger right here, but all that does is prevent you from pulling the trigger. The firing pin's still floating in there, and if there's some dirt or debris or something forcing the firing pin forward, while I've never seen this happen, if that were to be the case and you close the lever, it would fire as the bolt closed. So there is an out of battery for the trigger, but not for the firing pin. This does better in that the firing pin cannot reach the primer until the lever is entirely and wholly closed. So definitely safer. Very similar sighting system, nothing really different there. Buckhorn, bead or not bead front sight, but lighter and more handy. So here's where I'm going to go with this. We're going to go shooting in just a minute, by the way. I personally prefer the 73 because I'm a cowboy action shooter, and I want to cycle this gun as fast as possible on the clock at relatively or sometimes very close targets. However, most people don't need that, ever. The lighter weight, svelte nature, and handiness and safety features of the 92, for anyone other than someone pressing, drag racing these guns across the clock, the 92 makes a lot of sense. Another thing that makes a lot of sense is on the reproduction market. You're going to spend well over $1,000 on a 73 reproduction, probably $1,200 or more. And these 1892s, as of the publication of this video, are acquirable for $500 to $600, even in the same cartridge. So if you wanted to get into Deadeye at a Brutality match, all you'd have to really do is decide what cartridge you want, 45 Colt, 38 Special, and unless you really want to be that guy, the 92 is probably your better choice. Oh, but wait, let's not go shoot yet. I have a couple more nerdy things to talk about with the 1892. Due to the different design, the other thing that is probably a significant advantage to the 92 is that there is no hole cut out here for the lifting mechanism. The 1873, the 1876, the 1866, the 1860, the lifter moves up like a giant block, and there's a hole cut into the lower receiver. So if you go prone or in the dirt can get in there. 1892, this is completely sealed mechanism. What that does mean, though, is it functions quite differently, and the feed angle is something I don't personally care for, although in practice it doesn't matter. Once you get a cartridge under the lifter in the 92, it actually sits like this at this angle. And as it lifts up, it's like this, instead of like this. So it's at this, and then the bolt picks it up, and then it moves up into the feed mouth, and then chambers. Now, I can feel this when I do this. When I chamber around, I feel this thing happening. In a 73, the lifter directly aligns the cartridge with the chamber and just goes straight in. Now, in practice, does this matter very much? Probably not very much, but it's something to consider. One other huge advantage for the 1866 and 1873 is how easy it is to work on. Take off a side plate, all the guts are there, you can get right in there. This is not easy to work on. You start taking this apart and it kind of explodes like a Swiss watch, and you better know what you're doing. So I do not recommend disassembling a 92, and you won't need to in practice, generally speaking. But if you were to use this for cowboy action shooting or for black powder cartridges, and you were to use a straight wall cartridge, this happens to be 38, but 45 Colt, something like that, that doesn't seal the chamber as well as, say, 4440, you're going to get some back blow or blow by of black powder fouling into the action. You could just spray it out, but every once in a while on a 73 and 66, you got to take those plates off, pull out the mechanism, clean it off, and put it back together. You get blow by or blow back on this and get a bunch of black powder fouling in a 92, and you've got a day in front of you. It's not a day, I'm probably exaggerating, but you have a lot more work in taking this apart and putting it back together. So if you're going to use black powder in an 1892, I recommend a cartridge that seals the chamber better than a straight wall like 45 Colt. But if you're going to use this with smokeless, it doesn't even matter, entirely irrelevant. As I said, the rifle length and therefore the magazine length dictates the amount of ammunition that holds. This one holds 12 rounds. You could actually chamber one and put one more in and have a total of 13. This one's in 38/357 Magnum. That is what I recommend for most people getting into this, especially Deadeye for the Brutality matches, because you can buy that ammunition anywhere and it's pretty cheap. I prefer 45 Colt and other bigger cartridges, but if you're not reloading, don't bother. Anyways, we got 12 rounds in here. Let's go ahead and give her a whirl. There you go. Is it as fast as a 73? No. Is it slow? Absolutely not. So, got a couple more rounds in my pocket here. What do you got here? I think I got 5 of them. So here's the Kingsgate. Real simple reload, just like any other one. You just shove them in there. You don't have to even put them in all the way until the last one. 2, 3, 4. Do I have another one? Yep. 5. Actually, I do want to thank True Shot Ammunition. They are helping support the channel by occasionally giving me some ammunition. So, not sponsored. This is not a sponsored video, but I want to shout out to them. They didn't even ask for that. They just said they wanted to support the channel, and they sent me some cowboy ammunition. This is 38 MagTech 38 Special Cowboy from them. Thank you, True Shot. They also sometimes donate to the Brutality matches for prizes and such, and we really love them for that. So, if you like supporting people that support the community you want to be a part of, True Shot Ammunition. Again, they didn't even ask for that. I'm just doing that. So 5 more rounds here. Huh, that happened to me twice. Let's go ahead and try that again. I think I'm just not cycling it all the way. I'm not used to this gun. Let me go put some more in there and we'll give it one more whirl. All right, I got 10 in here this time. I'm just going to make sure I cycle this all the way. Again, no slouch. Unless you're going for the fastest speeds possible, drag racing at a traditional cowboy action SAS style match, you won't notice the difference. So, all in all, I guess I'm kind of convincing myself. If you want to get a lever action, there's a good reason to look at the 1892. Again, unless you're historically minded or want to shoot the fastest possible, this does everything you want it to do at less than half the price. So check out Heritage Manufacturing for one of these. Now, I did get this sent to me from them. They did send me this one gun, and they sent it to us to use it at the Brutality matches. And we used it for one of our stages at High Desert Brutality. Everybody shot it, and it ran reliably for everyone. So this has got hundreds of rounds through it already. And so that's really cool. And I want to thank Heritage Manufacturing for that. They are part of Rossi, Taurus, that whole group. So any Rossi, Taurus, or Heritage Manufacturing 1892, they're all going to be essentially this kind of gun. You just got to decide what cartridge you want it chambered in, what length you want it in, and for $500-600, you're in the lever action game. Come join us at Deadeye at any of our Brutality matches, brutalitymatches.org. But also, if you like this kind of content, please consider supporting the channel. We are completely demonetized. The YouTube algorithm hates us. And so please share, like, and subscribe, that normal thing. But more importantly, we are completely crowdfunded. The only way we keep this channel going and are able to do these videos, besides support from companies like True Shot, and sometimes some things like Heritage Manufacturing sending us a gun, the only way we keep this channel alive is from direct support from viewers like you. It's been the case for almost the entire life of InRange now, 9 years. Anyways, patreon.com/InRangeTV. Every dollar counts. And you get early access to Brutality matches and discounts. And I think I'm going to fire up doing Q&As again. but maybe only publish them to Patreon supporters. I don't know. I'll think about that. But if you can support the channel, every dollar counts. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. But also, I understand money is not infinite. Just like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, but more importantly, share with your friends. Hopefully you'll be out there shooting a lever gun too, because I love lever guns and they are super fun. Thanks, guys.